Hey guys, this is Snap. Today we're going to be talking about Archnemesis in Retrospect, also going over the Siege of the Atlas expansion. I'm going to try and go over all of the changes we made to all of our builds and all of the stuff we were doing while we were leveling up, maybe give you guys some insight into how we're making decisions, and maybe this will help your group in the future. We just got finished with our last day of mapping as a group. After the 7-day push as a group, we made exactly 20 mirrors plus additional exalts for the split, but after all of the value, including all the gear, it's probably something like 22 mirrors if we were to liquidate everything right now. So it's somewhere in the ballpark of 21 to 22 mirrors split between the 6 group members plus the trader. So to give you guys a little bit of perspective of what the 7-day push looks like for our group. But first things first, let's just hop into the leveling. The leveling was kind of scuffed for us. We had 2 people immediately get kicked out into queue at the mudflats. We sat in a 50,000 player queue after queuing all morning for like an hour and a half. So that set us back like 30 or 40 minutes or something like that. And then we loaded in. We were also super behind. It also sucks being the Scion as the one that disconnected, since the Scion definitely has the worst league start in terms of the campaign. You're just super fucking scuffed. You have to get so much help. And so I was like really struggling the first couple acts because I was behind and trying to catch up. And I was definitely making a few mistakes just because I was super frustrated at the DC. But regardless, after that, we went into the normal lab. We had to do normal lab 5 times, 5 full completions before we were actually able to complete normal lab, because we would all go in there together and we would make it through the first 2 phases of Azaro. And then as we got to the last room, we would promptly crash and have to rerun it. Repeat that 5 full times for our full normal lab experience. Other than that, I think it went mostly fine. There weren't too many mistakes. The servers weren't too bad after that, but boy, it was fucking painful doing normal lab 5 times. Completed our Katava right on the 4-hour mark. That's including the disconnects and the 5 normal lab attempts we had to do to finally get it through. So overall, I think, 4-hour Katava, not that bad, including all the disconnects and stuff. I'm pretty happy with that. So we farmed BA for a bit, warping into completions, and we very quickly realized the power of Ruckus. Ruckus is a node on the tree here that gives you an 8% chance to spawn 20 additional exiles. You then pair this with all exiles are possessed by a tormented spirit. On top of that, there's one node which is super good down here, which gives you exiles have a chance to have an additional reward. Now, the rogue trader is super OB because what it does is it puts a little icon on the map, similar to how legions have a reward icon, and it makes it super easy for you to scout whether or not a map has an active ruckus in progress. And if there is a ruckus, you can easily just scout maps, dumpstering them at the speed of light until you proc a ruckus, and then you can go in, clear all the exiles. They drop an insane amount of loot early on, and you can actually do the chaos recipe at the speed of light. It's actually nuts. I'm gonna put some footage here on the screen of just the insanity of ruckus early on. What you can really do is, like, once you get all of those passives allocated, it's something like 30 points or something like that. You can just start doing the chaos recipe at the speed of light. It's almost like too many items to do the chaos recipe with. So barring any kind of substantial nerf to this combo on the Atlas passive tree next league, this is definitely what we're going to be focusing on as early as possible next league. It is super strong for your early economy, and I think it's even better than low-level heisting. One thing I noticed about the low-level heisting is that there were a lot of people doing it, and so a lot of the big value uniques that people were getting on were substantially diluted in value. One example of that is I bought my Unnatural Instinct on my build early on for 55C, which was actually like 0.6x at the time, and then like 2 days later, that item shot up to like 7x. I think that's because a lot of people were doing those low-level heists and putting a bunch of stuff like Unnatural Instincts onto the market, which a lot of people couldn't really use, as well as other uniques. And because we had so much chaos buying power from all of our chaos recipe, we could snipe a lot of these really early uniques that were useful for our later on builds. But day 1 for us was pretty much our 2 Atlas pushers. We had the global first Exarch kill on one of our pushers, and then somebody else had sniped the other side before we were able to get there. So the farming group was just ruckusing this whole time, doing chaos recipe at the speed of light. I think we actually over prepared for our sustain. Mapping sustain this league was just a complete joke, so I think we could have definitely spared ourselves some unmakings. I think we invested a little bit too much into our mapping sustain. The hardest part was getting all of the bossing content out of the way and getting your void stones, and the favorite map slots are definitely a huge pain in the ass to get all of them unlocked, especially the feared. So I think next league we're probably going to be rebalancing a little bit how we do the carry split. I think we're only going to have 2 pushers, which is going to be the seismic trappers or whatever minor trapper we're going to be playing next league, and then I think we're going to have our mana guardian just stay in armor brand cremation. Just spamming on a ruckus focus strategy is probably the plan, unless that gets nerfed. Once we were done with the Atlas folly, we had our void stones. We started transitioning to like 1 orb cemeteries pretty quickly. We only ran really a few of those until we really started to do like 5 orb cemeteries. We did a few low tier 5 orb cemeteries just to get some gear before we really felt comfortable going and jumping up into red tier cemeteries with 5 orbs. Cemeteries, this league's super profitable. I'm going to link down below to my MAPWATCH data that has all the data scrubbed here. It shows our average card drop rate for all of the cemeteries, and additionally as how long each of them took. We had an average map time of 19 minutes minutes and 22 seconds. Out of 109 cemeteries we ran throughout the week, we bricked a total of 20 of them, and the criteria for those bricks is if the map lasted less than 10 minutes. A lot of the bricks we were having were just due to disconnection issues on our carry and or our Culler, or somebody else was DCing. We had very little deaths with our current endgame setup. It's actually super strong. It felt super good. And we found a total of 82 brothers stashes in a total of 89 unbricked maps. So our total brothers stashes per maps is about 0.92. So that card drop rate is super solid. Once again, I'm just going to link down to the spreadsheet so you guys can look at all the data yourself if you'd like. Feel free to make a copy and work with the data if you want to see. Next thing to go over is some of the changes we made to some of the builds. I'm just going to go over the major changes here. I have taken snapshots of every character in their current gear set. If you're curious, you want to look at all of them, just so you get an idea of what realistic gear might look like on these characters. But the first one to talk about real quick is the Vaal BV Assassin. This build honestly worked out phenomenally. It's even better than I initially thought. We put down like a demonstration in our party comp video of maybe what the BVs would look like, but I had no idea the insanity that would come out from a build like this. It is the top tier clearing skill in a party. It is just bar none the best skill right now. The advantage is obviously it doesn't really rely on clusters. We just had an 8 passive cluster jewel with some resistances to get res cap. We had an energy from not 2 passive. This thing is garbage. And then obviously Secrets of Suffering is one of the expensive buys, but you're going to need that on any carry build you play anyways. So the non-reliance on clusters makes it super easy to transition to. Other than that, the gearing is basically the same as we've always been doing. Nebulous, Double Call the Brotherhood, Badge of the Brotherhood. You've seen all of this before. We ended up using 2 Soul Rippers here. One of them did not have Instilling Orbs on it. The reason for that is so that we could have a little more control on when we were popping the Soul Ripper. We found ourselves particularly in some alphas. We had not enough souls to start the BV chain reaction. So we got a really high charge Soul Ripper that we could use on demand just to make the alphas feel a little more consistent, so we had the charges when we needed it. So that way we have 2 Soul Rippers, one with an Instilling Orb used on full, and the other one is an Overflowing Chalice, giving us charges to both of them. You can see we dropped our Mana Flask here because we have Vault Clarity in the party now, and that's not problematic for the Culler, as we'll explain a little bit later on. But there weren't very many substantial changes to this particular build from our previous version of it. It just worked out so well. The one thing we did add that wasn't in the original build guide here was just a Vaal Righteous Fire. It adds a little more damage. It's not super necessary, but we felt so tanky, so confident that just pushing Vaal Righteous Fire over and over didn't really feel like a downside. It just felt like free damage, so we put that on. But anyways, let's move on to the Orbot. So for the Orbot, I made a few slight adjustments then to what I originally recommended here. Taking a quick look here at POE Ninja, looks like 55% of all Scions have a Covenant equipped. Once again, that's including all Ascendants, not even just Orobots. Although this Ascendancy is dominated by Orobots, I think it's pretty crazy to see the impact that Covenant had. And I fucking love seeing all you people copy this shit and just fill it up on ladder. I fucking love it. Thank you. But one of the main changes here on the Orobot that I didn't really expect to happen here was the addition of the Ashes of the Stars amulet. Now, upon looking at this amulet, I thought it was a little out of our price range before seeing what the price of the amulet would actually be. You know, on the release teasers, they're coming from the endgame bosses. I was just under the assumption that these amulets and stuff were going to cost like 20x or something like that because this fucking shit is so strong. But apparently the bosses are a complete fucking joke. So basically you can fit this amulet in now and it doesn't really have a big downside. The quality you get to all skill gems is super OP on a few of the alt quality auras, not to mention the +1 level of all skill gems. You have 2 options here. You can equip this amulet early on. However, you will lose a breakpoint and be at 86 overcap. The way you can obtain back that overcap is socketing 1 Forbidden Flame, 1 Forbidden Flesh. You need to choose one of the ascendancies that you don't have. So technically, the value of Necromancer, Pathfinder, and Champion are the same, because once you have the jewels that allocate one of the ascendancy, you simply just choose the other 2 that you don't have. So basically, you're going to be looking for the cheapest ones here. I personally bought the champion ones. They were 1.8x each, which is an absolute steal. Pre-league, I looked at the jewels and didn't even consider equipping them because I just thought that these things would be 20x plus. But that was just absolutely wrong. These things are an absolute joke. These things are like a x and a half, 2x. So if definitely 100% jam these in. It's actually crazy. But once we get that aura effect back from champion, that allows us to drop the Jinx Juju and keep the same amount of overcap. When you put an Ashes of the Stars amulet on, you get +1 to level of all skill gems. And then what you can do is combo that with a Scepter with +1 to level of all spell skill gems. This means you actually don't need a +2 Covenant or a +2 anything, because you're going to be getting that +2 off of the purities, so you're going to hit the breakpoint on the purities. This is going to make your chess piece a lot cheaper. You can get a corrupted +1 skill gems like Piece of Trash Scepter for like 10c. And then this also brings down the cost of the Covenant. You don't need to spend money corrupting this and or 5 linking it to get the +2. So you can maybe stay at 86 overcap and then put on the amulet early if you get it for cheap, and then a scepter hitting the same breakpoint on the purities at level 23, and then later on you can socket in the 2 jewels, Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh, to get that overcap back at 87. This was one of the main changes I did to the build from the POB I released pre-league. These items are just too cheap not to use. Now, there are a lot of good alt qualities you can use with this Ashes of the Stars amulet. You can get alt quality on the purities, which will actually give you a good amount of penetration. Additionally, Divergent Determination and Anomalous Defiance banner give you an insane amount of armor in PDR. Now, this stat doesn't actually work in POB yet, the plus 30 to quality of skill gems, so this armor calculation down here is a low ball. In game, I have something like 82k armor. Now, this is personally where I'd stop if you're doing T16 maps. This is probably going to be what's going to feel good enough to start clearing T16, 5-orb deli, and it's going to feel great. Now, if you want to take this build further, there is a more expensive version of this aura bot that pushes it to 90 overcap with a little bit of additional investment. Now, that additional investment comes in the form of a chest piece replacing the Covenant with a elevated 30% non-curse auras. And because you're low life with a core skating, you can actually craft gain life as ES. It's a very, very effective craft here. If you have 1500 life or 1600 life, that craft equates to adding 160 ES onto the body armor. But basically, if you replace the chest piece Covenant with a elevated effect chest, and then you socket in a potency, once again with the Forbidden Flame and Flesh with Champion, this very easily lets you hit 90 overcap. Now, fitting in the auras is a little bit harder, so you do have to get some implicits on jewels. Now, there's nothing crazy like a bunch of voices in here, but you do need some good corruption, specifically on stuff like an Energy from Within. Also, a potency with a -2. I also have a Hubris here with an essenced 10% efficiency. It also has an enchant, but there are a few ways to fit this in. And because, once again, you're using a +1 scepter with a +1 amulet here, you don't actually need a +2 corruption anywhere. Now, in order to fit everything in on life, you're going to be using Skyforce. Some of you might turn away from the Skyforce, but if you're doing the lockout sextants, which you should be doing, you won't even feel the no regen. But basically, this allows you to run your triple purities with a level 4 Enlighten linked to Arrogance, which is where you're getting a lot of your additional aura effect. And that is where you're getting your aura effect for 90 overcap. Other than that, it fits in the same amount of auras as before. You're just getting a lot more aura effect on your purities. Another thing to note here on the body armor is you will need to get a +1 to level of socketed support gems. This levels up the Enlighten once, which is super huge in terms of the life reservation to fit everything in. Now, to craft this chest piece, it's actually not too hard. You just start with a Redeemer, Vaal Regalia, high eye level, obviously. I believe you're going to need eye level 80 for T1 aura effect, but you might want to get 83 so you can hit T1 ES, but the bare minimum is probably going to be this eye level 80. Basically, you have two options here. You can alt aug until you hit 2 influence mods, or you can just chaos it until you hit 2 influence mods, at which point you try to elevate the aura effect. Here, I put on 2 influence mods. You can do this by alt auging, or you can do this by chaosing. It's really your choice. You can also do reforges. What you do here is you use an elevate orb. You put elevate on it. I missed. I'm going to do it again. I hit. Now I have an elevated aura effect. From here, you're going to want to grab any body armor that is Elder, that is able to roll +1 to level of socketed support gems. Eye level 80 is the minimum here. This can be on any base, armor, whatever, and you're going to need it to roll just this influence mod, which is level of socketed support gems. Once you have that other chest, you're going to mash them together with an awakener aura. You basically just awaken it here. Boom, you have a chest with non-curse auras and socketed support gems. Hopefully this rolls good. If you roll ES, that's great. You can either choose to craft %ES or the gain life as ES craft, and that's going to be your cheap entry-level chest piece. Now, you can get a super crazy regalia that's like 500 plus if you just roll this a few times. It's not super expensive per try, maybe like an X, so that's pretty much the basics of crafting this. But yeah, basically, the more expensive version of the orb bot is you're going to be putting on this regalia with a +1 to support gems. You get a 4 Enlighten with Arrogance in your chest. That lets you run absolutely everything with 90 overcap. It also has sky high ES. I'm at 7,500, and the armor once again isn't calculating correctly, so it's like 7.5k with like 90k armor or something like that. Absolutely nuts. And if you wanted to invest more into your aura bot, this is definitely the direction I'd take it. Looking to put a Redeemer chest on with aura effect, elevated aura effect, and then running the purities on Arrogance. From here, you can look to maybe jam in a Voices and or 2 large cluster jewels with corrupted efficiency clusters so you can fit in the last 50% aura. It's just a bit of a stretch and maybe not worth it for most builds. Once again, you're going to get a choice between your last 50% aura. It's either Malevolence or Haste, and there aren't a ton of builds that benefit from both a ton. It's not super mandatory on Spark, and haste isn't super mandatory on BV, so pushing your build to those kind of extremes might not be really worth it to clear all content. But if you want to go the voices route, large cluster jewels, and get a bunch of corruptions, you can do that. Anyways, moving on to the curse bot. Curse bot worked out great, no problems. This build's super cheap. Replica Doedres, looking great. Cluster jewels, we reforged them all, super easy. We got the veteran defenders. The shield we got was actually way better than we originally POB'd. We also corrupted it for 30%. This carried the ES a lot. He was able to put on Southbound and Wind Shrieks, so he can mark and Vaal Cyclone, but neither of these are super mandatory. If you want more ES, drop the gloves and boots for actual big ES gear, and that's your personal decision. So one other thing is we also put the Ashes of the Stars amulet on the curse spot. Previously, we had a curse amulet so that we can mark enemies, but we found our damage to be so high that marking was completely unnecessary, so we just completely dropped the mark. And that's where we got the Wind Shriek here for that extra curse. And then basically you get a fuck ton of curse effect on the Ashes of the Stars amulet, so it's super worth getting on the curse bot. I think at the price, it is current best in slot. The quality on the gems is just too nuts for a lot of these builds. And if it's like an X or 2X, it's just a no-brainer. Slap this on. Other than that, build is the same. We didn't really make any adjustments here. Now, we did make a few adjustments to the Mana Guardian, not necessarily on the pathing or anything like that here. His mana pool is a little bit lower than we usually do, but that's because we made some adjustments to his the skills he's using here. He's only at 13k mana. You can definitely get up to 19k mana, but the main reason his mana is a lot lower is because we put the Blightwell Talisman on. The Blightwell Talisman is super insane for his personal recovery, especially with the permanent Vaal Discipline. And the reason he needs the extra mitigation recovery is because he started to use Soul Link on everybody. We thought we'd combine the best of both worlds between the Mana Guardian, the Minor Support, and or the Soul Linker. The Mana Guardian can definitely get away with linking everybody with a Blightwell Talisman. It is super powerful. And we 100% felt every single map that he wasn't there with a Soul Link. This shit is so strong. Definitely try to fit this in on your Mana Guardian and consider Blightwell as a trade-off for the mana so you can survive. Other than that, Torrent's Reclamation also loses a little bit of mana, but the speed is also super nice quality of life. So we dropped a little bit of the mana here. We're not getting as high of ES pools, but the sheer mitigation we're getting from the Soul Link is undeniably worth the trade-off. Now, the Culler here has a lot to talk about. We actually finally made the jump over to Petrified Blood Corrupting Fever. Now, I know this was used in a few standard players' solo MFing builds, but we finally found a way to jam it into group MFing scenarios. For those who don't know, Petrified Blood locks out half of your HP bar. And the only way to recover your life up to more than half of that HP bar is through flasks. And any additional recovery you're getting past that halfway mark is not able to be regen. The only way you can go above half is if you're getting life recovery from a flask. Now, we do have a little bit of recovery from a flask in the form of a Divination Distillate. And the way this works is we can push the Divination Distillate to get 510 life over 5 seconds, and we combat that degen with Corrupting Fever as well as Blood Rage. This causes a little bit of a ping pong of your life, where you're going back to full because you have a lot of life gain on hit from the life gain on hit we have from Feast of Flesh, as well as a Vitality Watcher's Eye here with life gain on hit. But the Petrified Blood is super powerful because it does two things. It lets us run Vaal Clarity in the party. It also frees up 2 flask slots on the Culler, and he can use those 2 flask slots for defensive flasks, as he doesn't need to use Soul Catcher and Lavianjas anymore to keep up his Divination Distillate. The degen from Blood Rage and Corrupting Fever can be combated with the Divination Distillate regen, and you can balance it so that you're not getting enough recharge to ever reach full life from the flasks. The second thing Petrified Blood enables is when you're taking very large hits and your blood pool is getting completely petrified, you can actually start to leech your way back to full using life gain on hit effects from Feast of Flesh as well as the Watcher's Eye, and this makes you substantially tankier because in that small window you can recover enough life so that you actually don't die. This makes the Culler substantially tankier, and this is actually one of the biggest improvements I've seen to the Culler in a long time. We definitely should have been doing this sooner. The Petrified Blood is super strong, highly recommend. We also pivoted off of Ice Nova personally. We crashed a few too many instances with Ice Nova. If you can get away with using Ice Nova and it doesn't crash your zone, that's great. However, we just started using another Vaal Blade Vortex with item rarity here in culling. It felt pretty good, and this was the thing we ended up culling with mostly. Now, obviously, we still had a supplemental Kinetic Bolt just so he can proc life gain on hit effects with his Kinetic Bolt. But for the most part, the Vaal Blade Vortexes are just heat-seeking missiles that goes and culls the entire map. Last thing to talk about is the miner support. This build went super well. The damage this build provided is just insane. I did the math real quick with all of the party buffs, and the miner support is providing a 5x damage multiplier to our current damage output, so this is definitely worth playing. This build is literally just super cheap. Just some random rares, and then you throw some mines, and then that's the whole build. 5x damage, good to go. But yeah, this build works out flawlessly. We definitely didn't make very many changes to this build. It actually got a throwing speed buff from the minefield buff that was in 317, which is a little odd, but hey, we'll take it. This is definitely the support we'll be playing from now on if there isn't any substantial changes to it. This was super solid. Very glad we tried this out. All right, now that we're through all the builds, let's just quickly go over the stuff we were doing to juice all the maps. So we were doing a half and half split of Conqueror maps with the quantity and pack size from Martial Forces. And the other half was Eater of Worlds influence with the altars. We found that the consistency of the pack size and the quantity from Martial Forces to be a little bit better. However, if you do have the altars from the Shadow of Hunger mod, this can high roll and get a bunch of unique dupes and definitely be a lot more juicy. But I think on average per map that the quantity and pack size here from Martial Forces is better on average. One other thing we changed to here is we started using Fortune Favors the Brave with Shaping the Valleys. The reason for that is we found Triple Beyond to be way too laggy on average, especially in cemeteries. Even with Double Beyond, we were experiencing crazy slowdowns even in Double Beyond maps. So we opted to go to Double Beyond, one from the map mod, one from the Sextant, and then we just started putting Shaping the Valleys on with Fortune Favors the Brave, which gives us extra quant pack size and rarity. And then we also have a chance to roll Triple Beyond or in Abyss or Bloodlines, which is all very good mods. And ironically, the worst one is Ritual that you can roll, which is the most expensive. Just because doing rituals in a group isn't really worth it. The tree didn't really change much past that. We took all the Alva quant nodes, Harbinger, Abyss. Abyss has turned out to be pretty crazy as expected. Other than that, you're just pathing around all the effective mods. You grab the Eater of Worlds altars, and then you're over here on all the Beyond stuff. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to put a link in this paste bin, which has all of our Atlas trees here. This is our early cemetery. If we're doing like 1 orbs with low investment, we have an Omega map sustain, which is for the pushers. And then we have the regular Juicer Atlas, which is using Eater of Worlds influence. And then the Conqueror Atlas, if you're rolling Conqueror maps, which is the Veritania maps and such. The last one is a Supplemental Atlas, which is generating you the Conqueror maps as well as Alvas. That last Atlas is just spec'd into map duplication as well as Alva Atlas missions, so you can have more. And then the last tree here is just the Ruckus Rush. It should be pretty straightforward. That's pretty much all the Atlas trees we were using. Now, in terms of juicing the maps, the way it started was we would obviously chisel and then alk scour our maps until we rolled beyond. We would then beast aug until full 6 mod maps. The beast mog is a Sakawine Cobra and a Krayakic Savage Crab. As you can see here, it's add a mod to a rare map. Once the map is 6 mods, you need to make sure you don't have minus max or minus aura effect. For us, those were the 2 unrunnable mods. And then once that map is rolled, we obviously apply 5 Deli Orbs. And then our Sextants was Beyond, Hunted Traders, 2 Breaches, or 2 Abysses as our third. And then the last one was Lockout or Soul Gain Prevention. So the 3 mandatory ones would obviously Beyond, Hunted, and then Soul Gain Prevention. And then the last one is a choice of elevated Sextants on Abyss or Breach. They're probably about the same. And then obviously all Winged Scarabs for us, which was Winged Div, Winged Reliquary, Winged Abyss, and Winged Breach. Now, as for Archnemesis itself, we found it to be okay early. It was super useful for us to get some like Chaos Recipe early out of the way. It's dropping a ton of rares. We also did some of the okay recipes, as like dropping an Exalt, which is cool, but we find it generally not worth the time, especially in a group. We eventually just had somebody putting in just random stuff all the time. Everybody's organs were constantly full. There's 100 organs picking up off the ground in a group. The 2 organs per map is definitely a lie. I see that getting changed in the future, so we'll see if there's any adjustments to Archnemesis, but for us it really wasn't impactful. So yeah, I think that sums up all the changes we did. Hopefully that sums up all the strategies we used. Maybe it'll help your group if you guys are planning on doing a late group start, but that'll be it for us in terms of the group play in Archnemesis. I think we're all hoping that hard mode comes out sometime in the middle of this league. I think that'll pull the group together again to do a big group push, so that should be fun. We're looking forward to it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this league as much as we did. I think it was one of the best expansions I've ever played so far personally. I enjoyed it a lot, A+. Once again, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.